I never thought a simple joke at the bar would turn into the darkest night of my life. She laughed at me, mocking every word, while my friends stood there frozen. But what she didn't know, I had already seen through her lies. And karma. Karma was coming for her. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and share this. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. My name is Kalen Vera, and I always thought I knew how to read people. I thought I could sense intentions, spot lies, and recognize honesty from a mile away. But that night changed everything. It began like any other Friday, the kind where laughter and chatter filled the air. Drinks clinking in celebration of the week that had finally ended. My friends and I had gathered at this rooftop bar, a place with city lights sprawling below us, neon reflections flickering in our eyes, and music that pulsed in time with our excitement. I had no inkling that amid the buzz, someone's laughter would cut sharper than any blade I'd ever known. She was Lysera Quint new to our circle, but carrying herself with that rare kind of charm that made people lean in, laugh a little louder, and hang on to her words. At first, I didn't notice the undertone, the subtle sharpness that lingered in her voice when she spoke to me. It was playful lore, so I thought. Her smile was bright, her laughter contagious, and she had this way of tilting her head that made it seem like she was sharing a secret with the whole room while actually mocking only me. I laughed along at first, trying to match the energy, wanting to believe I was imagining it. But the more she talked, the more I felt that prickling sensation behind my chest, the one that tells you someone isn't what they seem. My friends were there too, oblivious at first, caught up in their own conversations, their drinks, their casual camaraderie. But soon enough they noticed it too, the way her eyes flicked to me. The small, almost invisible smirk that danced at the corner of her mouth whenever I stumbled over a joke or a story. And then she laughed. A single piercing laugh, not the warm, carefree kind, but one that echoed judgment. I froze for a moment, caught between embarrassment and confusion. My voice faltered mid-sentence, and I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the way she carried it off, the way she made it look so effortless, like she had rehearsed every glance, every tilt of the chin, every inflection to expose me. And what hurt even more was my friends, my own friends standing there, smiling awkwardly, unsure if they should intervene or join in. Some of them chuckled, nervously caught between loyalty and amusement. I felt my stomach twist, that familiar knot of humiliation tightening with every second. The more she laughed, the smaller I felt, as if every word I spoke, every gesture I made, was under a microscope, designed solely to mock me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, when I stumbled across the first piece of evidence, an offhand remark she made when she thought no one was listening. A tiny slip revealing a side of her I had never imagined. She wasn't just laughing at me for fun. She was laughing because she wanted to see me fail, because she had been planting seeds of doubt. Whispering to others behind my back, twisting stories, bending reality. The casual conversations, the friendly advice she gave, they weren't kind gestures at all. They were calculated, manipulative, and cruel. And my friends, as much as I loved them, had no idea. They were blind to it, laughing along with her, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. That night, every laugh, every smirk, every glance felt like a challenge. I realized I was no longer just embarrassed. I was angry. Anger mixed with disbelief, disappointment, and an unsettling sense of clarity. I knew now that I couldn't let it slide, couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. Something had shifted inside me. I was no longer the guy who would sit back and take it quietly. This required attention. And deep down, I knew one day the scales would tip. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her laugh. Lysera Quint's laughter haunted me, echoing in the quiet corners of my mind, twisting every memory, every interaction. I kept replaying her words, her gestures, the way she made me feel exposed in front of my friends. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the more I observed her, the more cracks I noticed. Tiny inconsistencies that didn't fit the charming persona she projected. It started small. A message I wasn't supposed to see, left on her laptop when she stepped away. I froze as I read it, a casual line meant for someone else. Mentioning me in a way that chilled me, she was laughing at me. Not just to friends, but deliberately behind my back, spreading twisted versions of my words, turning jokes into ridicule. I felt a bitter knot tighten in my chest. How long had this been going on? How many times had her laughter been more than just a laugh? My friends, they didn't know. They were still trapped in her spell, unknowingly validating her cruelty. I tried to confront her once, subtly, casually, the way I thought a reasonable person might handle it. I asked her about a conversation I'd overheard, watched for any sign of honesty. She smiled, of course, that disarming smile that hid poison beneath its surface. She denied everything with such ease. It made my blood boil. Every word she spoke was layered, calculated to manipulate, to convince me I was imagining it all. That's when the anger shifted into something darker, something I couldn't ignore. She was not just mocking me. She was weaving a web, carefully crafting a scenario where I looked small, incompetent, foolish. I started paying closer attention. I noticed the whispers in the corners, the subtle smirks when I entered a room, the way she tilted her head when recounting stories about me. Friends would laugh at anecdotes I barely recognized, distorted memories reshaped to fit her amusement. I wanted to shout, to throw something, to make her hear the roar inside me, but I didn't. I had to be patient. I had to watch. The turning point came when I discovered her real betrayal. It wasn't just the lies, the subtle humiliation, or the laughter. She had actively interfered in my career, undermined projects, and twisted messages to ruin relationships I had worked for years to build. Each piece of evidence felt like a new scar, each revelation tightening the coil of fury inside me. I couldn't believe someone I had trusted, even tolerated, could be capable of this level of deceit. I felt a strange combination of betrayal and awe at her audacity, at the calculated precision of her manipulations. Every interaction became a battlefield. Her charm was a weapon, my silence a shield. I studied her moves, anticipated her words, and cataloged her betrayals in my mind. The humiliation I felt earlier had evolved into something sharper, more focused. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was aware, alert, awake to the truth of her intentions. And as much as I wanted to lash out immediately, I understood the power of timing, the beauty of a well-executed revelation. Late nights became my proving ground. I traced her actions, connected the dots she had so carefully hidden. Each discovery stoked the fire in me, transforming my anger into a plan. I knew the satisfaction wouldn't come from confronting her in haste. It would come from patience, from precision, from exposing her in a way that she couldn't deflect or deny. And in that realization, I felt a calm clarity I hadn't known before. The betrayal was complete, undeniable, and yet I hadn't struck yet. That night, as I sat alone in the dim light of my apartment, the city humming faintly outside, I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not an impulsive one, but a deliberate one. Lysera thought she had me figured out. She thought I was just another target, another audience for her laughter. She had no idea the storm I was building, no clue that every mock, every whisper, every deceitful grin she threw at me would one day return in a way she'd never imagined. Karma, I thought, tastes sweetest when served cold, and I was ready to serve it. The first step in revenge isn't action, it's observation. That's what I told myself as I sat in silence, letting the chaos of my anger settle into something sharper, something precise. Lysera Quint had underestimated me, assumed I was just another victim of her cruelty, someone who would quietly retreat into embarrassment and let her laughter echo unchecked. She didn't know I had seen through her facade, that I had cataloged every slip, every whisper, every betrayal. And now it was time to turn patience into power. I began small, almost imperceptibly. I listened more than I spoke, watched more than I acted. Every conversation became a puzzle, every glance a clue. Her arrogance was her weakness, so blatant, so confident that she never suspected she was being studied. I noticed how she boasted about her control over people, how she manipulated situations with a delicate flick of charm and timing. Each boast, Each casual brag became ammunition. I stored it all in my mind, letting it ferment into something undeniable, something that would one day strip her of the control she thought she had. There were nights I barely slept, replaying encounters, retracing her steps, connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. I began gathering proof messages she couldn't deny, small recordings she thought were private, emails twisted by her manipulation. Every piece of evidence was a piece of the puzzle, a thread I could pull to unravel the web she had spun around me. And with each new discovery, my confidence grew. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was in control, and the taste of inevitability made my pulse quicken. The planning itself became almost ritualistic. I imagined the perfect moment for revelation, the precise timing when the truth would hit hardest. It wasn't enough for her to be exposed. It had to be dramatic, undeniable, and absolute. Her laughter, which had once cut through me like a knife, would be silenced not by my fury, but by the undeniable weight of the evidence she couldn't escape. I pictured her face, the moment realization would finally dawn, the shift from smug superiority to helpless shock. That image alone kept me awake for nights on end, fueling a focus I had never experienced before. But revenge is more than evidence, it's psychology. I had to anticipate her reactions, predict the instinctive defenses, the lies, the attempts to twist perception. I rehearsed my words in my mind, each phrase measured, each revelation layered to maximize the emotional impact. I wanted her to understand with crystal clarity that she had underestimated not just me, but the consequences of her actions. Every mock, every betrayal, every secret laugh she had thrown my way would return to her, sharp and cold, and she would have nowhere to hide. Yet in the midst of planning, I felt a strange serenity. I realized that revenge isn't just about hurting someone, it's about reclaiming control. I was no longer humiliated, no longer the target of derision. I had become the orchestrator, the conductor of a symphony of justice that was long overdue. The anger that had once consumed me was now tempered with patience, transformed into something methodical, something brilliant. I could almost taste the satisfaction, the inevitable collapse of her carefully constructed facade. And it was sweeter than any impulsive act of retaliation could ever be. Finally, I knew I was ready. I had the evidence, the timing, and the strategy. Lycera Quint's arrogance had blinded her, her mockery had sharpened my focus, and the betrayal had ignited a precision in me that I never knew existed. One misstep, one misplaced confidence on her part, and it would all fall apart. And when it did, she wouldn't just feel the sting of karma, she would understand it. In every way possible, in a way that would leave no room for denial. I leaned back in my chair, letting the city lights outside reflect in my eyes. This was no longer about anger. This was about inevitability. The storm was coming, and I would make sure she couldn't escape it. The night finally arrived, the moment I had been waiting for. Everything I had observed, every piece of evidence I had collected, every carefully crafted plan, all of it came together like a storm about to break. Lycera Quint was unaware, wrapped up in her own sense of triumph, thinking she was untouchable. That arrogance had blinded her, made her careless. I watched from the edges, feeling a strange calm, my pulse steady, every nerve ready. I wasn't nervous. I was certain. And certainty has a weight, a power that anger alone could never deliver. When the time came, I didn't rush. I let her strut through her little world, basking in the admiration of those she thought she had charmed. Her laugh, that once terrifying sound, now felt fragile, hollow, waiting to shatter. I approached slowly, casually, as if nothing was amiss, my expression calm, almost casual. But inside, every heartbeat was a drumbeat of anticipation, every breath measured. I knew the moment of revelation had to be precise. Too early, and she might deflect. Too late, and the impact would be lost. Timing was everything. I began subtly planting questions, casually referencing things only she would understand. Her confidence wavered slightly, tiny, almost imperceptible cracks, but she masked it with her signature smile. The people around us, my friends, began to notice something shifting, a tension that hadn't been there before. I could feel it, the way the air thickened, the way every glance seemed charged with unspoken meaning. And then I pulled the first thread, showing a message she couldn't deny. A casual display meant to look like chance, and her eyes flicked frozen for just a fraction of a second. That fraction told me everything. She realized she had underestimated me. The revelations came one after another, each more damning than the last. Her lies, her manipulations, her betrayals all documented, undeniable. I presented each piece with calm precision, letting the truth speak for itself. There was no shouting at first, no dramatic accusations. Just the cold, heavy weight of reality pressing down. Her confidence began to crack, her smile faltering, eyes darting desperately. And then came the reactions from those around her friends and acquaintances who had once been charmed by her, now staring in stunned disbelief. The anger inside me rose again, but it was controlled, refined. I confronted her directly, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "Do you remember this?" I asked, showing proof of her scheming. "And this?" Another piece of evidence, another undeniable betrayal. She tried to deny it, of course. She always tried, with half-hearted excuses and frantic charm. But the facts were overwhelming, unstoppable. I could see her grasping, flailing, realizing for the first time that her laughter, her mockery, her little games had caught up with her. And then, finally, the moment arrived. The laughter she had thrown at me, the scorn she had enjoyed in front of everyone, it turned back on her. Her face, once full of smug superiority, now burned with humiliation. I didn't need to shout, didn't need theatrics. The weight of truth, the inevitability of karma, did it all. Friends who had once watched silently now saw her for who she really was. I felt a strange satisfaction, not cruel, but righteous. Justice had been served, not through revenge alone, but through revelation. As the room settled, Lysera stood there, defeated, grasping at excuses that no longer mattered. I walked away with calm certainty, the storm behind me having done its work. My chest was light, my mind clear. Karma had arrived not violently, not impulsively, but perfectly. Inevitably, in a way that words, anger, or confrontation alone could never achieve. And in that moment I understood the power of patience, observation, and precision. The laughter was over. The lesson had been delivered. And I, at last, could breathe. After that night, everything changed, not just for her, but for me. The air that had been heavy with tension, humiliation, and deceit was finally clear, almost crisp, as if the universe itself had exhaled. Lysera Quint's fall was complete, and I watched it unfold with a quiet sense of inevitability. She had spent so long believing she controlled perception that her laughter could manipulate reality. But in the end, she had only manipulated herself into a trap I had been patiently, meticulously setting. Karma, I realized, isn't instant. It isn't loud or flashy. It's deliberate, subtle, and devastatingly precise. In the days that followed, I saw the ripple effects of her exposure. Friends who had once been blinded by charm now looked at her differently. Conversations that once swirled with her lies now carried an awkward, unspoken weight. Her influence waned, and the very world she had tried to shape began to reclaim itself. People who had admired her cunning began to distance themselves, realizing the cost of aligning with deception. And as I observed it all, a profound sense of justice settled over me, not bitter, not vengeful, but calm, resolute, and complete. I thought about my own transformation, about the journey from humiliation to awareness, from anger to strategy. It wasn't just about her downfall. It was about reclaiming myself, reclaiming my dignity. The fear, embarrassment, and doubt that had weighed on me were gone, replaced by clarity and control. I understood, finally, the true power of patience, the way it sharpens perspective, tempers impulse, and ensures that when the moment comes, the impact is absolute. Revenge alone might satisfy in a moment, but timing, precision, and truth, those are unstoppable. Lysera tried briefly to salvage what remained of her world. She attempted apologies, explanations, half-hearted charm. But the damage had been done. Nothing she could say would erase the truth. And even as she flailed, I felt no satisfaction in mocking her, no desire to prolong her suffering. The lesson had been delivered, and the universe had done what I could not. It had ensured she would carry the weight of her actions fully and undeniably. That, I realized, was the essence of karma, not punishment, but the natural consequence of choices made in arrogance and cruelty. I walked through those days with a lightness I hadn't known before. My friends returned to me, some cautiously, some with relief in their eyes, sensing that the storm had passed. But even more importantly, I returned to myself. The man who had been mocked, laughed at, and betrayed was gone. In his place stood someone sharper, calmer, and unshakable, someone who understood that life's battles are not always won in the moment, but in the strategy and foresight that precede them. The victory wasn't just hers downfall. It was my own reclamation. And in the quiet moments, I reflected on the irony of it all. She had laughed at me, thinking it harmless, thinking it playful. She had believed that mockery was fleeting, that humiliation was temporary. But laughter, when born of arrogance and cruelty, often echoes back in ways people cannot anticipate. She had sown it, and it had returned to her in full measure, leaving no room for denial, no chance for escape. That was the final, enduring lesson. Actions always have consequences, and the universe has a way of balancing the scales in ways even the cleverest cannot foresee. I never gloat. I never celebrate in excess. I simply let truth speak for itself. And in this case, truth had spoken louder than any words I could ever utter. Quint's empire of mockery and deception had collapsed, and I had walked through it unbroken. Karma had arrived, precise and undeniable, and I could finally breathe again. The laughter that once cut through me had ended not with bitterness, but with justice, clarity, and a quiet, enduring satisfaction that resonated far deeper than revenge ever could.